Hey guys, tonight we slip softly into a part of history you probably weren't taught in school because, frankly, it's just a bit too peculiar for textbooks. Have you ever imagined a postal system where your delivery partner has four legs, antlers, and a stubborn fondness for dumplings? That's right, we're heading into the misty hills of ancient China, where couriers didn't ride horses through the forest. They rode fast, specially trained deer. You step into the stillness of a moonlit village where the air smells faintly of pine needles and charcoal smoke. Somewhere nearby, a rice pot clicks softly as it cools, and the last candle in the postmaster's office is flickering low. You were already halfway asleep on a warm pallet of straw when someone knocked, twice, politely. The knock no courier ever wants to hear. A letter has arrived too late. Of course it has. It's wrapped hastily in mulberry paper, the seal still soft with fresh wax, and missing one very important thing: the official stamp. Now, in most eras, this might cause a delay. But in the winding wilderness of the Eastern Han courier routes, delays weren't a luxury. The message had to go tonight. You rub your eyes, shrug into your traveling coat, well worn and faintly sticky with yesterday's tea accident, and light your red lacquered lantern with a sigh. The soft hiss of the wick settling into flame is oddly comforting. Its glow spills across the low wooden walls, glinting off a rack of bundled scrolls and the shelf where someone's misplaced a single boiled egg. You sling a satchel over your shoulder, then, right, the plums. You reach into the drawer by the door and pull out a pouch of salted dried plums. No journey should be made without them, not just for the taste, but for the tradition. Even ancient dispatchers believed plums kept the deer calm and the messengers awake. You step outside. The night is cool and quiet. A soft breeze plays with the grass near your feet. Above, the stars are tucked behind a sleepy fog that creeps gently over the treetops. And there, waiting beside the hitching post with a yawn wide enough to reveal tiny teeth, is your ride. Plum Cake, your deer. You're not supposed to name them, but everyone does. This one earned hers by sticking her snout in a pastry box during training and eating exactly one sticky rice cake before realizing it was filled with pickled turnip. She hasn't trusted baked goods since. You greet her with a sleepy pat on the flank. She's sleek and tall, her fur shimmering gold-brown in the lantern light. Her antlers curve gracefully over her head, delicate yet strong, decorated with tiny copper bells that tinkle as she stretches. One has a ribbon tied around its base. You don't remember tying it there, but it's been lucky so far. Plum Cake sniffs your pocket. You sigh, produce a single salted plum, and let her nibble it daintily from your palm. The letter is tucked securely in the scroll case on your back. You check it one more time, fingers brushing the seal, which is warm like it's still thinking. And just like that, you mount. No saddle, no reins, just two small notches carved into the deer's leather harness for your knees, and a grip on the fur that is more ceremonial than functional. You hold up your lantern. The flame flickers against the fog. "All right, Plum Cake," you whisper, and she twitches her ears. "Let's go deliver whatever this is." She launches forward without hesitation. Your lantern swings gently as she bounds along the narrow path, hooves silent against the packed earth. The trees arch above you like cathedral ceilings, and the silence feels almost sacred, broken only by the bell at your belt and the faint jingle from her antlers. Every rustle in the bushes makes your heart do a polite little leap. Not fear exactly, just awareness. There could be anything out there. Wild boars, bandits, spirits still confused about what dynasty they're in. And yet, as Plum Cake leaps across a shallow creek and the mist curls around your ankles like a curious cat, you feel a strange calm settle over you. There's something about the rhythm, the bounce of the ride, the crackle of the distant fires and hearths you'll never see, the way the air smells faintly of lavender from someone's field long since harvested. You realize in a drowsy corner of your mind that you haven't asked who the letter is for, or why it needed to be sent so urgently. But that's not really your concern. You're the courier. Plumcake glides along the ridge path with all the grace of a dancer who's done this routine 100 times and still expects an apricot at the end. Her hooves barely make a sound as she darts between root and rock, threading effortlessly through gaps that would have sent a horse scrambling. The moon has tucked itself behind a haze of cloud, but your lantern's warm circle of light keeps a respectful distance from the trees, illuminating only what it must: your path, the curve of her back, and occasionally a moth, surprised to be cast as tonight's co-star. You shift slightly in your seat, if you can call it that. There's no saddle, no stirrups, no reins, just your knees tucked behind Plumcake's shoulders and a gentle grip on the strap looped around her neck. She's not a vehicle, she's a partner. A small, fussy, four-legged partner with opinions about mud and a soft spot for tangerine slices. And as she slows for a breath near a twisted pine stump, you find yourself thinking again of why this system ever existed in the first place. Why deer? It's not the sort of question you ask out loud, at least not when you're on the clock. But here, in the quiet hush of a mountainside night, it feels safe to wonder. The truth lies buried somewhere in the ancient mail scrolls, records from dynasties that flickered by like fireflies. Eastern Han, Jin, even the chaotic Three Kingdoms. While the great northern plains favored horses, strong, fast, built for wide-open gallops, southern China had other ideas. Here, the land is steep, forested, dense with bamboo and fig. The trails snake along cliffs, hug the edges of rivers, and vanish into mists that don't care what century it is. A horse would panic, a wheel cart laughable. But a deer, especially one trained from fawnhood, could leap narrow gaps, slide down shale slopes, and thread through roots without disturbing a single fern. And unlike horses, deer were quiet, very quiet. In an era when the post often carried royal secrets, marriage contracts, military updates, letters from imperial concubines to their families in exile, stealth wasn't just appreciated, it was essential. You remember the old postmaster at Wooey Station, the one with a beard that always smelled faintly of pickled cabbage. He once said, "A man with a horse makes an entrance. A man with a deer delivers and vanishes." You didn't get it at the time, but now, halfway up a ridge with Plumcake breathing softly beneath you, it makes perfect sense. Still, the deer had their quirks. Unlike horses, they couldn't be housed in stables. They needed space, air, shade. Many courier stations maintained what they called quiet yards, not much more than open groves behind the post houses where the deer would be allowed to graze, nap, and sometimes snort at butterflies. And they didn't wear saddles, not properly, just simple harnesses made of mulberry bark fiber, soft enough not to rub their fur raw. Instead of iron horseshoes, they wore flexible leather wraps around their hooves, sometimes with bits of padded silk sewn into the soles, because nothing ruins a diplomatic message like a limping courier. Plumcake huffs gently. She stopped at a fork in the path, one trail descending into a gully of shadows, the other winding upward toward a rise bathed in soft starlight. You let her decide. She always does. She chooses the stars. The air grows thinner as you rise. Somewhere an owl calls, soft and grumpy. You adjust your cloak and reach for a plum, more for the ritual than the hunger. It's salty and sweet and puckers your mouth just enough to keep your brain from fully shutting down. But even in your half-sleepy state, your thoughts drift again. There's an old tale told among the riders, half joke, half warning. It says the Emperor Wu of Han, centuries ago, once insisted on creating a fleet of imperial deer couriers after a stallion tripped on wet stone and dropped a message into a gorge. A message, it was whispered, that could have changed the course of an entire war. Historians still argue whether the story is true. Some say the tale was just invented by the Deer Handlers Guild to justify their yearly tea stipend. Others swear it's in the royal archives, hidden in a scroll labeled only Miscellaneous Errors. You're not sure which you believe. But as the path narrows and the stars blink brighter overhead, it doesn't really matter. Plumcake pauses, her ears twitch. You both freeze. There, barely audible, something moves in the brush. A whisper of leaves, a single crack. You tilt your lantern toward the sound. The wind picks up just a little as you crest the ridge, rustling through the pines in a way that feels more like breath than breeze. You tighten your cloak and let Plumcake choose her pace. Slow now, almost reverent, as if she too senses something ancient in the air. The path narrows again, hemmed in on both sides by moss-covered stones and low ferns that shimmer silver in the lantern light. Beneath you, the earth softens to a moist give. No hoof clicks here, just the whisper of movement, like walking on someone else's dream. You remember what they call this stretch. Whisper Road. Not an official name, of course. The maps, what few exist, list it only as Post Route 7R. But every courier knows the truth. Whisper Road is old, so old that even the trees seem to remember your name, or at least the sound of hooves that came long before yours. Some say this path predates the Empire. Others say it was carved not by people, but by deer themselves, threading between mountain temples and forgotten villages, creating routes so instinctive no cartographer ever thought to record them. You duck under a low branch, its needles cool against your forehead, and notice a small charm tied there. 3 jade beads on a strip of red silk, a protection charm. Plumcake steps carefully now, as though stepping through history itself. You let your thoughts wander. If you squint at the night just right, you can almost imagine it. The couriers who came before you, slipping between trees with messages from generals, monks, and lovesick poets, each with a lantern, each with a satchel full of letters, and salted snacks, of course. It's easy to romanticize it, but you know the truth isn't all soft mist and noble missions. Some of those letters, they weren't love poems. Some were orders to burn, to betray, to disappear. The Whisper Road has carried secrets heavy enough to silence an entire village. Which might explain the feeling, like something walks beside you in the dark, just out of sight. Still, not every secret here is grim. Some are just strange. Like the time a courier in the Tang dynasty swore he was followed by a deer with glowing antlers, only to discover the glow came from fireflies tangled in its fur. Or the legend of the tea courier who vanished for 3 days and returned babbling about a bamboo grove that led to a floating market in the sky. Historians still argue whether these stories have any basis in reality, or if they're just courier campfire tales designed to make the plum wine last longer. You're not sure what you believe, but you do believe this. Something about this road makes everything feel thinner. The line between past and present, between real and not. Plumcake snorts softly, her breath steaming in the cool air. She halts. You look ahead. There, just at the edge of the trail, is a small wooden post with a faded inscription. The characters have nearly vanished from centuries of weather, but you can still make out one line. This path remembers. And next to the post, half buried in moss, is a narrow bench. You slide off Plumcake's back, your legs grateful to be straight again, and take a seat. The bench groans politely. Plumcake begins grazing, pulling up clumps of dewy grass like she's on a picnic. You let your head tip back and breathe in deeply. The scent of pine, damp earth, something faintly floral, like dried chrysanthemum. And, yes, that same waxy sweetness again. The seal from the letter. You dig it out and hold it under the lantern. The wax is smooth, pale gold, and faintly warm to the touch, still, as if it hasn't yet finished sealing its message. It smells like osmanthus, light and lingering. Definitely not standard issue. You turn it slowly, no name, no emblem, just a swirl of characters so stylized they seem more decorative than functional. Whoever wrote this letter had money, or power, or both. And you? You're the lucky messenger stuck hauling it through a possibly haunted forest in the dead of night with a deer who only respects you when you feed her plums. Plumcake lifts her head, her ears toward the shadows. You freeze. A sound, not close, but not far. Not footsteps, not animal. A rustle, and then a hum. Faint, beautiful, almost like singing. You stand, lantern raised, the flame dancing.
Plumcake picks up speed again, hooves soft and sure against the damp ground, as though the whispering forest has, for now, that you're welcome. The trees begin to thin slightly, replaced by wide ferns and low, craggy rocks that sparkle faintly under your lantern's flickering light. Somewhere in the dark, a frog lets out a long, satisfied croak. It's the kind of sound that says, "This is my swamp. Please deliver your message and move along." You do. As you ride, you find your thoughts drifting, not to the strange seal or the hum in the woods, but to the lesser-known cousin of the Silk Road, the one your instructors at the Courier Academy never seemed excited to teach. Back then, you thought the big routes, the glamorous ones with camels, bazaars, and dazzling coins, were where history was made. But now, out here, with nothing but a deer, a lantern, and a slightly unsettling letter, you begin to understand. It was the forgotten routes, the muddy, narrow, deer-trodden veins of the empire that kept it alive. The wet silk roads, as some jokingly called them. Not that they carried silk, not really, but the name stuck, thanks to a Tang poet who once compared a sodden courier's robes to a drowned merchant's shipment. The poem did not win any awards. These minor courier paths didn't link distant empires. They connected the living to the governing, small towns to larger ones, a mountain monastery to the capital, a farmer's protest to a magistrate, a love letter from a minor concubine to her cousin who may or may not have been a spy. And deer, fleet, quiet, sure-footed, were the only reliable way through terrain that shifted with every rainfall. Horses? Too heavy. Wagons? Don't even try. Only deer could navigate the sodden trails that wound through the misty highlands. And not just any deer. Imperial delivery deer, trained from youth to obey voice commands, recognize trail markers, and ignore the temptations of unattended buns. Historians still argue whether these deer routes were officially part of the imperial system or simply a convenient regional workaround. Some claim the central government never acknowledged them. Others insist that the Ministry of Posts had an entire section devoted to antler-related logistics, buried deep in their archives under special travel considerations. You suspect both are true. That's how things often work in the empire, officially unofficial. Like the rule that couriers must not open letters, or read seals, or sniff them when no one's watching. Plumcake snorts. You glance around. The forest has shifted again. The trees are lower now, their branches forming a gentle canopy above you, like a woven ceiling of soft needles and fog. The trail curves left, then right again. And there it is, just ahead, your first stop, Lantern Hollow. It's not much, A rest station carved into the base of a hill, half hidden by a sloping ridge of ferns. A single lantern hangs from a bent iron hook near the doorway, its light nearly gone, but still enough to show the faded character for tea. You slide off Plumcake's back. She immediately begins licking dew from a mossy stone, completely uninterested in the next phase of the mission. The door to the rest station creaks open as you approach, and out comes a smell so soothing you nearly forget where or who you are. Herbal tea. Not the fancy kind, just a simple blend of ginger, wild mint, and a crushed goji berry or two warmed slowly over charcoal. Inside, the station is dim and cozy. A brazier glows faintly in the corner, and bundles of drying herbs dangle from the ceiling, brushing your hat as you duck through. "Another one," a voice mutters from the back. You spot a woman hunched over a clay kettle, her robes practical, her hair pulled back with a single wooden stick. Mistress Lynn. Every rider on Route 7-R knows her. "Sit," she says, without looking up. "You smell like fear and deer sweat." You obey. She pours a cup of steaming tea, sliding it across the table with the kind of grace that only comes from scolding hundreds of sleep-deprived couriers. You sip. It tastes like, not quite safety, but something close. And then she eyes your satchel. "Urgent delivery?" she asks, drying her hands on her sleeves. You nod. "No stamp." That gets her attention. "No stamp?" You shake your head. Wax is warm, smells like osmanthus. She raises an eyebrow. "And you're drinking tea?" You stare at your cup. She chuckles, which somehow makes you feel worse. Then, after a pause, Plumcake takes off with a renewed bounce in her step, either energized by the break or fueled by the subtle power of millet envy, since you didn't save her any. You suspect the latter. She throws you a sideways glance as you settle back onto her spine, and her antlers brush against a low-hanging pine bough with just enough drama to count as a passive-aggressive flick. "Sorry," you mumble, adjusting your satchel. "Next time you get 2 cakes." She snorts, forgiveness pending. The path tightens again, curving around a slope where a landslide once sheared off part of the trail. Below you, the dark drops steeply into a narrow ravine, and for a few minutes you cling a little closer, trusting Plumcake's judgment more than your own sense of balance. You pass a moss-covered milestone that looks like it's been mistaken for a shrine. Someone has left a few dried berries and what appears to be a beetle carved from walnut shell. Farther on, you spot fresh hoofprints, cloven like Plumcake's, but spaced differently. You lean forward. Another courier? Unlikely. This part of the route was supposed to be clear tonight. And then, just past a crooked bamboo fence that seems to guard nothing at all, the trail opens into a long flat stretch, just wide enough for 2 deer to walk abreast. Plumcake slows as if sensing something. Her ears twitch. A bell chimes faintly, but not yours. You turn your head, and for a moment your breath catches. There, stepping onto the path ahead, is another courier deer. Pale, spotted, wearing a deep blue harness woven with symbols you don't recognize. And mounted on its back is someone in robes so neatly pressed they seem to defy the humidity. He raises a hand in greeting. You nod back. His deer huffs. For a few seconds, the 2 animals size each other up, ears flicking, hooves shifting. Then the rider speaks, voice dry and slightly amused. "Unexpected traffic on Whisper Road." You offer a tired smile. "Letter came late." "Doesn't it always?" he says, adjusting a bundle wrapped in silk behind his back. You fall into pace beside him. His deer keeps a careful, practiced rhythm. Plumcake makes sure she's always half a hoof ahead. "Where from?" he asks. "Zeng's Rest." He whistles softly. "That's a climb." "Headed to the capital?" You hesitate, then lie. "Just past the ridge, Ridgeview Monastery." He nods slowly, but something about his smile shifts. Not suspicious, just sharper. "What about you?" you ask.
North, Fang Ridge Station, he replies smoothly, but the deer keeps heading west. I'm not arguing. You share a polite laugh, the way riders do when no one wants to admit they're watching each other's hands too closely. He glances at your scroll case. Scented Wonyx? You blink. What? The letter, he says. I smelled osmanthus on the wind. You don't respond. He doesn't push, just reaches into a side pouch and pulls out a small wrapped parcel. He tosses it lightly your way, and you catch it, surprised by the weight. Dried ginger chews, he says, keeps you awake when the road starts to blur. You nod your thanks and slip it into your bag. A moment of silence follows. Just hooves, rustling leaves, and the faint rhythmic squeak of the mystery courier's saddle ties. Then, softly, he says, "You know, horses would never make it here." You glance at him. Too loud, too heavy. He nods. And too proud. That makes you smile. It's true. Deer don't care about medals or glory. They care about getting to the next patch of edible moss and not falling off a cliff, which makes them surprisingly excellent couriers. You remember a line from your training scrolls, penned in red ink. The deer does not ask what the message says. The deer only runs. But of course, deer aren't the only ones curious. Historians still argue, your instructor once said, whether the deer courier system was widespread or just a few eccentric officials' obsession. The records are vague, possibly on purpose. You watch the stranger as he veers slightly left, his deer pulling toward a trail that splits into thick brush. He tips his head. Safe ride, friend. Likewise. And just like that, he disappears into the mist. One blink, and he's gone. You turn forward again. Plumcake flicks her ear as if to say, he was weird. You agree. And the ginger chews in your satchel suddenly feel like a puzzle piece you didn't know you were missing. The path begins to climb once more. You lean forward to help balance Plumcake's stride, the lantern casting a golden arc over the increasingly narrow trail. Above you, the trees begin to thin again. You're approaching the ridge.
The ridge reveals itself not as a grand overlook, but as a quiet curve in the path. No dramatic views, no sweeping panorama, just a subtle change in wind and a widening of the sky. The trees fall back respectfully, giving way to low shrubs and craggy ledges where moss clings like ancient paint. Plumcake pauses at the peak, her hooves digging into the gritty soil as she surveys the descent. You take the opportunity to adjust your lantern. The flame flickers, then steadies, casting long shadows that slip away behind you. And there, faint but distinct, a sound on the wind. A bell. Not your own, not the other couriers either. This one is heavier, deeper. It rings just once. And every hair on the back of your neck pays attention. You know what it means. The leopards are active tonight. There's an old superstition among deer couriers, never spoken aloud, of course, but whispered in stables and tea-houses when the fire burns low and everyone's finished pretending to be brave. If the warning bell rings once, ride quiet. If it rings twice, ride fast. If it doesn't ring at all, ride only if you've written your goodbyes. Tonight, it rings once. You exhale slowly, adjusting the strap of your satchel. Plumcake snorts softly, and you place a steadying hand on her neck. "We'll be quick," you murmur. "No dawdling, no shortcuts." She flicks an ear. Agreement. You begin your descent. The trail down the far side of the ridge is narrow, almost too narrow for a deer with male and a full-grown rider. It winds between stones that jut out like crooked teeth, and the undergrowth grows thicker, thornier. Somewhere nearby, a stream gurgles unseen. Halfway down, Plumcake stops. You feel her stiffen before you see it. Across the path, a paw print. Large, deep, fresh. You slide down carefully and crouch beside it. The edges haven't softened, no rain, no wind, just clean indentations in the mud with claw marks extending outward like a fan. Too big for a fox, too fresh for comfort. Plumcake doesn't bolt, she's too well trained for that, but her ears flatten and her breath comes faster. You reach into your side pouch and pull out the emergency charm. It's nothing fancy, just a copper bell tied with red thread, and a tiny strip of paper tucked inside with a prayer written in the careful calligraphy of someone who probably eats too much tofu and sees ghosts in everything. You hang the charm from her harness. Not for the leopard, really, for the forest. Sometimes it helps to announce you're passing through. Plumcake picks her way forward, slower now, more careful. You ride in silence, ears tuned to every crack of twig and rustle of branch. The forest seems to breathe around you, holding its breath, waiting. And then, a flash, just to the left. Something moves between the trees. You don't see it clearly, just the impression of movement, a ripple in the undergrowth, the sound of leaves brushing against fur. Plumcake halts. You do not breathe. For a moment, everything is still. Then, from far below, the second bell rings. Twice, low, distant, but unmistakable. Now it's time to move. You tap Plumcake's flank, and she responds with an elegant lurch forward, gliding down the slope faster than you've ever allowed her. The lantern bounces on its hook, casting frantic shadows against the rocks. You duck branches, grit your teeth against the wind, and cling to the harness as Plumcake accelerates. And then, light. Ahead, through the mist, you see it. A clearing, a rest station. You burst through the underbrush with a spray of dew and leaf litter, and Plumcake skids to a graceful stop just outside the low wooden gate. You slide off and reach for the latch. It opens before you touch it. A man stands there, barefoot, middle-aged, wearing an apron dusted with flour and ash. His beard is short and lopsided, like he cut it with a spoon. "Just in time," he says, as though you were expected. He ushers you inside. The interior is cramped but warm. A small clay stove burns in the corner, and on a nearby table sits a steaming bowl. The porridge is still steaming as you cradle the bowl in your hands, its warmth soaking slowly into your fingers. It's plain, millet and water, maybe a hint of ginger. But after the cold tension of the ridge, it tastes like a royal feast. You take a spoonful, and the heat glides down your throat, spreading calm. Outside, Plumcake snores once, softly. The man, whose name you still don't know, sits opposite you on a stool made from a tree root turned upside down. He's whittling something from a stick of cedar, perhaps a spoon or just fidgeting. You can't tell. "You'll want to leave before the fog sets in," he says without looking up. "When the cloud spills into the lower trail, even the deer get confused." You nod, still chewing. "Do you run this station alone?" He shrugs. "Mostly. Some say I was posted here by the Ministry of Posts. Others say I just stayed one day and forgot to leave." A joke? You think so. But in this place, where time feels like a puddle instead of a line, you're not entirely sure. Your gaze drifts back to the scroll in your satchel. It's quiet now, cool even, but the scent of osmanthus lingers on your fingertips. "Can I ask you something?" you say. He looks up. "Have you ever delivered one with this scent? The seal, I mean." His knife pauses against the wood. A long moment passes before he answers. "Yes." You wait, but he doesn't elaborate. "What was it?" you press gently. He resumes whittling. "Didn't ask, didn't want to know. But I remember the deer refused to cross the final bridge." You blank. "Refused?" "Sat down in the middle of the trail, wouldn't budge." "Then what happened?"
He stops carving. I walked the last mile, alone. You lean forward, and? And the recipient said, finally. Another pause. Then he adds, I never saw them again. A draft slips through the wallboards. It smells faintly of moss and something floral again. Not osmanthus, something older. You finish your porridge in silence. The fire crackles quietly. It's the only sound, besides the occasional rustle from Plumcake as she dreams about snack privileges. The man stands. If you're heading down to Green Hollow, you'll want to cross the Riverfoot Bridge before the second bell. The fog thickens faster than it used to. You nod. You've never believed in haunted trails, not really. But there's something about tonight. You check the lantern. Half oil. Enough for one more ridge, maybe two. He walks you to the door, barefoot on the cold floor. As you step outside, he hands you a small pouch. Inside are 3 cubes of pressed tea leaves and 1 dried apricot. You look up at him. He just shrugs again. In case you meet someone who forgot their lunch. Plumcake rises with a groan that suggests you owe her something more substantial than fruit leather. She shakes out her legs, bells jingling sleepily, and lowers her head for you to mount. Safe travels, the man says. Then, in a quieter voice, if something offers you a second path, don't take it. Stay with the deer. You want to ask why, but he's already turning back inside, the door closing with a soft click behind him. The trail greets you again with a hush. No birds, no frogs, only the rhythm of hooves and the ever-faint tinkle of antler bells. The mist is heavier now. Not thick, not yet, but insistent, like a wet scarf wrapping gently around your shoulders. As you ride, your thoughts drift, not to danger or even to destinations, but to a single question that settles into your chest like a pebble in a pond. How many messages are like this one? Undelivered or too strange to remember? You've read the training scrolls, you know the numbers. In the peak of the Tang Dynasty, over 3,000 messages were sent each month across mountain courier lines. Most were taxes, decrees, family updates. But some were strange. A carved peach pit sent to a widow. A folded silk square with a single word, wait. A scroll sealed with honey. Historians still argue whether these were code, ritual, or simply the confusion of a very large empire trying to stay in touch with itself. You suspect it's all 3. The trail bends left, then right. Somewhere up ahead, you glimpse the silhouette of a small footbridge, a simple thing of rope and bamboo slats swaying gently in the evening wind. You reach it just as the second bell rings. Not from the mountains. From below, low, hollow, and far too close. Plumcake stops. She doesn't sit this time, but she turns her head.
You don't move right away. Plumcake doesn't either. The two of you stand at the edge of the bridge, breathing in the cool mist that clings to your skin like a damp glove. The fog has thickened, curling along the ground in slow, deliberate tendrils that remind you, uncomfortably, of the incense used during ancestral rites. The second bell continues to hum in your ears, though it's long stopped ringing. It wasn't the ridge bell. This one came from the valley. Deeper, older, you're sure of it. You shift slightly in your saddle, feeling the smooth leather of Plumcake's harness creak beneath your fingers. The bridge sways gently in the breeze. A single drop of water falls from the wooden support beam and splashes on a stone at your feet. You lean forward. We're crossing. Plumcake doesn't argue. She steps forward carefully, her hooves silent against the bamboo planks, as if she knows the bridge isn't just a structure, but a test, one you're being watched taking. Below, a stream rushes over black stones, swirling with dead leaves and something that glints like scales, or maybe just mica catching your lantern's light. Halfway across, you hear it. A laugh. Soft, childlike, but not playful. You stop. So does Plumcake. The mist shifts on the other side of the bridge.
A figure is there, not walking, not waiting, just there. They're short, robed in something loose and gray, and they don't move at all, not even when your lantern's glow spills onto them. Their face is indistinct, as though it refuses to be remembered. You and Plumcake exchange a long look. And then the figure speaks. "Courier," it says, not a question. You swallow. Your mouth is dry. Yes? The figure tilts its head. That message, it is not yours. You want to say something clever, or brave, or even moderately well-informed, but all you manage is, "No, I know." The figure reaches out one pale hand, not to take the scroll, but to gesture. "There is another path," it says, "safer, quieter, no leopards, no bells." Behind it, a trail emerges from the fog, one you swear wasn't there before. It glows faintly, like starlight caught in cobwebs. Plumcake backs up half a step, a soft warning. You remember the barefoot man's advice. Stay with the deer. You breathe. "No," you say gently, "we'll stay on the courier trail." The figure doesn't react, doesn't vanish, just lowers its hand and says softly, "Then you will see the lake." A chill passes through your spine, though the air is no colder. You nod once, respectfully. "Thank you." And the figure steps back into the fog. Gone. Just like that. Plumcake crosses the rest of the bridge in 3 swift strides. On the other side, the fog parts slightly, revealing the trail as it was before. Narrow, winding, full of the quiet crunch of damp leaves under hoof. But you're not the same. You glance over your shoulder once. Nothing behind you, not even footprints. You exhale. The lake. You've heard of it, never seen it. Supposedly, it only appears to couriers who've accepted a burdened message. That's what they call them. Messages that aren't just scrolls, but pieces of unfinished stories, threads that tug at something older than memory. The lake is said to be still, completely, a place where your own reflection tells you things you didn't ask to know. You don't believe in most of that. But tonight? Tonight, you've stopped being sure of what you don't believe in. Plumcake snorts, not impatiently, more like a sigh, a reminder to keep riding. You adjust your lantern again, the flame smaller now but steady. It casts long shadows that swing lazily from the trees, brushing the underbrush like ghosts looking for their socks. The trail dips again, and the sound of water grows louder. Not a stream, not a river, something larger. Still. You ride another mile in silence. Then, just past a grove of crooked willows, you see it. The lake. It opens like a secret, smooth as stone. Not a ripple disturbs its glassy surface. It reflects the sky so perfectly, it takes your brain a moment to understand where the world ends and the mirror begins. You dismount slowly. Plumcake doesn't protest. Together, you walk to the edge. The scroll hums faintly in your satchel, not loudly, just enough for you to feel it against your back, like a heartbeat that doesn't belong to you. You kneel at the shore and look down. You press your knees gently into Plumcake's sides as she steps away from the lake's edge. Her hooves find their rhythm again, soft, deliberate, grounded. You do not look back. You've heard too many stories from couriers who did. The path leading away from the lake is narrower still, hemmed in by drooping branches heavy with moisture. The fog lifts slightly as you ascend, and for the first time in what feels like hours, you glimpse the stars above, distant and small, like pinholes in a paper lantern. You loosen your cloak. The air is warming, ever so slightly. This leg of the journey feels older somehow, like it hasn't been walked in decades, and yet remembers exactly how your footsteps should sound. After a mile or so, you notice a flicker of orange light ahead, tucked into a stone outcrop like a candle placed in the palm of a sleeping giant.
As you approach, you realize it's not fire, but the glow of oil lamps, dozens of them, arranged in gentle spirals around a low wooden gate. And beside that gate sits a woman, hunched on a stool with a kettle balanced on her knees, and a very large cat sprawled across her feet. You dismount. The woman doesn't look up. "Courier?" she asks, as if you've arrived right on schedule. You nod, from Zheng's Rest. "Of course you are," she sighs, setting the kettle on a flat stone. "They always send the tired ones this way." The cat blinks up at you, orange-eyed and unimpressed. "Welcome to Pine Gate Post," she says. "I'm Mistress Hua. I have bad tea, worse stories, and one excellent blanket. Choose two." You smile despite yourself. Tea and blanket. Good choice. The stories are cursed anyway. She rises with a series of bones cracking in protest and disappears inside. The cat yawns like it's bored of you already and resumes its nap. Plumcake finds a patch of moss and begins grazing with the enthusiasm of someone who has seen too many spirit lakes for one night. The gate creaks as Mistress Hua returns with a cup and a folded bundle of cloth. She hands you both in silence, then sits again, hands resting on her knees. You sip the tea. It is, as promised, terrible, bitter, burnt, and probably made from leaves that once tried to be medicinal but failed the entrance exam. Still, the heat feels good in your chest. The blanket, soft as down, still warm from wherever she'd hidden it. You drape it over your legs and allow yourself, just briefly, to rest. Mistress Hua stares into the fog. You carrying one of those? You pause. Scented seal? She nods, eyes narrowing slightly. Osmanthus? You nod back. She exhales slowly, reaching into her coat for a pipe she doesn't light. Haven't seen one of those in 20 years. Last one who passed through never returned. Deer came back on its own, antlers tangled with silk. You glance toward Plumcake. She's sturdy, you say. Mistress Hua chuckles. That she is. She's got the look of an eater. The good ones always do. You sip more of the tea, then ask, what's waiting at Ridgeview Monastery? She doesn't answer right away, just taps her fingers against her pipe. Then, depends who you ask. You wait. Some say it's empty, she continues, abandoned, just bells and shadows. Others claim monks still live there, silent, ageless, writing scrolls no one reads. And some, she glances at your satchel, some say it's not monks you're delivering to, just something that writes back. A chill crawls up your spine. Historians still argue whether Ridgeview was ever sanctioned by the ministry, she adds. Its location shifts on every map. Some say that's a clerical error. I say it's a warning. You finish the tea, not because it's good, but because it anchors you. The fire in the lamps begins to fade, one by one. You rise, rolling the blanket carefully and returning it with a bow. Mistress Hua accepts it with a nod. Keep going, she says. Don't stop at the cedar grove. Don't speak if someone greets you in rhyme. And if the path forks more than once, choose the left that feels wrong. You blink. That feels wrong? She nods. You'll understand. Plumcake returns to your side, mouth full of moss and attitude. You mount. The gate creaks as it opens. And as you ride away, the lamps extinguish behind you. Not all at once, but in sequence, like falling stars. The trail bends again, rising into a stand of cedar so still you can hear your own heartbeat. And far ahead, Plumcake moves slowly now, not from fatigue. She seems perfectly alert, ears twitching, stride steady, but from something else, something in the trail, or perhaps something just off the trail. The cedars stretch tall above you, their trunks straight and close together like a forest of guards standing at attention. The bark glows faintly in the lantern light, soft brown, lined with silver lichen that seems to shimmer when you're not looking directly at it. The air is quieter here,
No frogs, no rustling leaves, just your own breathing and the faint creak of your satchel strap. And the scroll. It's grown warmer again. You feel it through the leather. Not hot, but present, like it's paying attention. Plumcake's hooves crunch gently over the cedar needles that blanket the path. You guide her slowly around a moss-covered boulder, and the trail forks. Just like Mistress Hua said. Twice. Two paths diverging, each equally narrow, equally uncertain, both shrouded in fog. You pause, look left, then right. One path slopes gently downward, lined with wild orchids and edged by what looks like abandoned shrine stones. The other veers upward, toward twisted trees and shadows that somehow feel wrong. Not threatening, just off, as if they were drawn by a slightly confused artist working from memory. You know what Mistress Hua said. Choose the left that feels wrong, which would be the upward path. You sigh. Why is it never the one with flowers? Plumcake says nothing, but she begins walking, uphill, the wrong left. The air thickens as you ascend, not with mist, but with scent. Wood smoke, rain-soaked parchment, and beneath it, a new note. Cinnamon? No, closer to cassia bark, sweet, dry, ancient. You ride in silence. And then, around a bend, you see it. A clearing, a wide, flat expanse with a single stone bench at its center and a tree that should not be growing this high. A jujube tree, somehow still in bloom, with red fruit gleaming among its dark leaves. You dismount. Plumcake does not follow. She stays at the edge, hooves planted. Not scared, not curious, just still. You approach the tree. The scent of cassia is stronger here, wrapped in the earthiness of ripe fruit and something else, something like old ink and melted wax. You sit on the bench. The scroll pulses gently against your back. You take it out. The seal is soft again, faintly glowing, not warm anymore, but not cold either, balanced. You turn it over in your hands. And for the first time, you notice a second layer of writing, tiny characters etched into the edge of the wax, so small you'd never have seen them without this light. You lean close. They read, "Let the carrier know this burden was chosen." You frown. You weren't given a choice, were you? But then again, no one made you accept the delivery. No one forced you to ride through fog and lake and silence. And yet, here you are, chosen. The tree rustles, though there's no wind. You glance upward. A single jujube fruit falls, bounces once on the stone bench beside you, and rolls to a stop against your hand. You pick it up. It's cool, firm. And for reasons you can't explain, you tuck it into your satchel beside the ginger chews and tea packet. You stand. The scroll is quiet now, still, as if satisfied. Plumcake watches you approach, then turns slowly and begins walking, without needing a prompt. You mount her back again, settling into the familiar weight of the saddleless ride. The path narrows once more, and behind you, the jujube tree sighs. The air grows cooler as you descend the far side of the hill. Shadows stretch long across the trail, and the sky above begins to brighten at the edges. Just a hint, a blush of dawn that promises rest is near. You begin to hear a sound. Not wind, not water. Bells. Small ones, gentle. And ahead, peeking through the trees, the first gray stones of Ridgeview Monastery emerge from the mist. You've arrived. Almost. The bells grow clearer as you ride closer, their chimes soft and irregular, like someone playing wind chimes without rhythm, or as if the air itself is humming just to pass the time. Ridgeview Monastery doesn't announce itself with grandeur. There are no towering pagodas or golden gates, no guards, no courtyard monks sweeping leaves in synchronized silence.
Just mossy stone steps curling out from between the trees, worn smooth by generations of forgotten feet. Plum cake slows to a stop. You dismount gently and stretch your legs. They ache, but in that oddly satisfying way, like they've done something worthwhile. The air here smells of cold stone, dried pine resin, and the faintest trace of burnt ink, if such a thing can be said to have a scent. The monastery looks tired, not ruined, not neglected, just aged in a way that feels conscious, as if the building itself has agreed to shrink from history's spotlight and now prefers to be left alone. The front gate is slightly ajar. You step forward. Plum cake does not follow. She simply settles into a patch of clover, folds her legs beneath her, and begins chewing with the serene focus of someone who knows exactly where her job ends. You give her a grateful pat on the shoulder. Don't wander off. She flicks an ear. Agreement. The monastery's entryway is dim, lit only by the growing light of dawn and the occasional glint of something reflective, bits of old copper maybe, or polished stones embedded in the walls. The silence is thick, but not hostile. It's the kind of quiet that asks not to be disturbed too quickly. Your boots scuff against the floor as you walk in, the sound small and oddly reverent. Inside, the space widens into a circular hall, empty save for a single figure seated at the far end, beneath a window shaped like a lotus flower. The figure doesn't move. You approach slowly. As you draw near, you realize it's a monk, or was. Robes draped in careful folds, head bowed, eyes closed. But not asleep, not dead either. Somewhere in between. Their breathing is almost imperceptible, but it's there, a slight shift in the robe with each exhale. You stand before them, scroll in hand, unsure whether to speak. But you don't have to. Their eyes open. Not quickly, not in surprise, just as if finishing a thought. They raise their hand, not to take the scroll, just to gesture, place it. There's a small pedestal beside them. You place the scroll carefully upon it. The monk studies it for a long time. Then, in a voice quieter than the wind, they ask, "Did you open it?" You shake your head. "Did you consider it?" You hesitate, then nod. They smile faintly. Good. Curiosity is not failure. Their hand brushes over the seal, not breaking it, just acknowledging it. The sender knows, they say, and now so does the message. You blink. What? They close their eyes again. The scroll chose a path. You simply walked it. You take a step back, unsure whether to press for more. But something holds you. Not fear, not obligation. A sense of reverence. Behind you, a second monk appears, ghost-like in movement. Younger, but similarly calm. They nod once to the seated figure, then to you. They motion toward a bench carved from a single slab of cedar. "Rest," they whisper. "We will prepare a letter in return." You sit, unsure if this is routine or ritual. Minutes pass, or more. Time feels looser here. You watch as the younger monk takes a brush, dips it into ink, and begins to write. The parchment accepts the strokes in a way that seems fluid, like the ink was already there, waiting to be revealed. You cannot read the characters. They are precise, but unfamiliar. An older dialect, or perhaps something else entirely. When they finish, they do not fold the letter. They do not seal it. They roll it gently, place it into a new scroll case, and offer it to you. You hesitate. What is it? Their head tilts. It is a response. You take it, half expecting it to burn, or hum, or sigh. But it's silent, heavy with meaning, but light in your hand. You rise. The elder monk speaks again, eyes still closed. "Follow the same path. Do not stray. This message will walk beside you." You bow deeply. The return journey begins in silence, not out of solemnity, but because the world around you seems to be holding its breath. Even Plumcake, usually quick to jingle her antler bells or snort at low branches, moves with an unusual stillness. You glance at the new scroll tucked safely in your satchel. It doesn't pulse like the last one. It doesn't hum or warm your back or make the trees lean in just a little closer. But it does feel alive. The monks never told you what it says. You didn't ask. Somehow you know it wouldn't have mattered. You follow the trail down the hill. It's familiar, but now tinged with difference. The trees look the same, but you spot little signs you missed before. Charms tucked into bark crevices, footprints that are not yours nor Plumcake's, a single jujube fruit resting in the center of the trail, untouched and shining like lacquered glass. You do not stop for it. The morning light filters through the canopy in long golden bars, warming your shoulders. It's the first sunlight you've seen all night. You wonder how long you've truly been traveling. The hours feel strange, like the folds in old maps where borders never quite align. Plumcake keeps an easy pace. Her ears flick left and right, alert but calm. At one point, she slows and noses a patch of ferns, then moves on without comment. You pass the jujube clearing. The tree is gone. Not dead, not cut down, just no longer there. In its place is a mossy stone ring, like a foundation for something no longer remembered. You think about the message you carry now. Not the content, but the weight of it. You wonder how many couriers have carried scrolls like this, unread, unanswered, unrecorded. The kind of letters that never enter the history books, but shape the story anyway. Historians still argue whether these back trails, these whispering paths with deer and mist and jujube trees, were ever truly sanctioned by the imperial court. Some claim they were unofficial rituals turned into practice by generations of riders. Others suggest the monks built the routes themselves, not for convenience, but for secrecy. And a few, very few, believe the routes formed naturally, like veins in a living organism, revealing themselves only to those with something worth carrying. You don't know where you stand on the matter. But the way the trail curves exactly when you need it to, that feels like more than erosion. You descend past the ridge again, and for a fleeting moment, the lake comes into view. Still, perfect, exactly as it was. This time, Plumcake doesn't stop. She trots past with purpose. But you glance sideways, and your reflection is already looking back. This time, it nods. You're not sure why, but you nod too. By mid-morning, you reach the fork again. The left path, which once felt wrong, now looks ordinary. The other path, the one that seemed safer, is blocked by a fallen cedar. A gentle nudge, perhaps from the trail itself, reminding you, don't second-guess what you've already survived. You ride on, back to Pine Gate Post. Mistress Wah is still seated in her stool. The cat is still asleep, now wearing a different expression of disdain. She doesn't rise, but gives you a look that says, "Of course you came back." You bow. She raises her teacup in reply. You ride on. Lantern Hollow greets you next, its chimney puffing a lazy trail of smoke. The barefoot station keeper spots you from his garden and waves. You don't dismount. He just grins and mouths, "Still with the deer." You nod and keep going. The forest begins to open again. The trees become less curious. The mist thins. By late afternoon, you see it, the outer wall of Zeng's Rest, the wooden beams catching sunlight, the tiled roofs warming beneath the early evening glow. Plumcake gives a short huff of recognition and speeds up slightly. Not quite a gallop, but the closest she'll come without bribery. You ride through the gate as a shopkeeper waves absently, more concerned with stacking radishes than marveling at your return. Back at the post house, the light above the door flickers, and the familiar scent of boiling soy broth drifts from a neighboring kitchen. You dismount. Tie Plumcake's harness with a practiced knot. Remove the scroll case from your back. Inside, the postmaster is asleep on a bench, mouth open just enough to catch flies and dreams. You nudge him.
You wake the next morning with the vague, achy heaviness of someone who rode through more than just mountain fog. Your legs feel like bamboo poles left out in the rain, stiff, a little bendy, and slightly disrespected. The postmaster's snoring has stopped, replaced by the sizzle of scallion pancakes in a pan 2 doors down. You blink at the ceiling for a moment, trying to remember whether the jujube in your satchel was real or part of a fever dream. Plumcake is already awake. You find her nudging a cabbage cart with her nose, trying to free a head of something leafy and forbidden. You intervene before her criminal record expands. After breakfast, lukewarm broth, half a rice cake, and 2 deeply judgmental pickled plums, you check the message board in the post room. A new scroll. Your name, a red string. You groan. The postmaster shrugs. You rested, you've got a deer, and you didn't turn into a shadow last time. I'd say you're our best rider at the moment. That's because Chen fell off a bridge, you mutter. Chen fell off the ground, the postmaster corrects. His deer refused to step off the porch, and he still somehow managed to sprain both ankles. You sigh. Where to? He gestures at the scroll. This one's different. You're not going out. You're going in. You pause mid-tea sip. In where? The sorting cellar. You blank. The sorting cellar? That place hasn't been opened in years. He nods solemnly. Exactly. You eye the scroll again. It's smaller than the ones you've carried, lighter, sealed with plain wax and stamped with a sigil you haven't seen before. 3 tiny plum blossoms arranged in a triangle. You're kidding, you say. The postmaster's eyes gleam. Time to learn the real work, courier. You descend. The door to the sorting cellar is behind the kitchen, tucked behind a shelf of fermented bean paste jars and forgotten soup ladles. A lantern is already lit on the wall beside it. Someone's been down here recently. You open the door. The stairs creak like they're remembering something embarrassing. Each step down smells more of dried ink and dust, and faintly of soybeans. At the bottom is a narrow hallway lined with pigeonholes and hooks. Scrolls hang in bundles, some tagged with string and notes, others marked with mysterious painted symbols that clearly used to mean something to someone. And there, in the middle of the floor, sits a figure cross-legged on a rug, surrounded by open letters, folded maps, and what appears to be a tea tray shaped like a goose. She looks up. Her eyebrows arch. "Oh, good," she says, "the deer rider." You resist the urge to bow. "That's me." She points to a crate. "Sit. You're going to help me read old arguments and sort tea deliveries from love confessions." You glance at the pile beside her. One scroll is labeled, "Very urgent," possibly about spiders. You sit. She hands you a bundle tied with twine. Your job? Separate the ones meant to be forgotten from the ones that forgot themselves. You blank. What does that even mean? She smiles, mischievous. You'll know. The scrolls that need remembering will feel heavier. You untie the bundle. The parchment crackles. The first letter is short, 4 characters, a name, a date, and something like a wish. You hold it for a moment. And it grows warm. Not hot, not like fire, just like breath. Like someone sighed into the paper and asked to be remembered. You look up. The woman nods. That one goes back on the route. To where? To who? She shrugs. Doesn't matter. The road will know.
You stare at the scroll, then place it in the to-be-carried tray. The next scroll you pick up is blank, not even a name. You hold it for a long while. Nothing happens. You place it in the tray labeled, "Offer to mice for nesting." Hours pass, or maybe more. Time here feels optional. The stack shrinks. Your fingers smudge with old ink. And somewhere above you, a bell chimes once. Faint, distant. You look up. The woman is already holding out a fresh scroll case. "Looks like you'll be riding again," she says. "This one's been waiting." You accept it without asking, because you already know. Plumcake is probably standing by the door, and somewhere out there, another path is opening, waiting, choosing, calling.
By the time you step out into the courtyard again, the sun is tilting low across the rooftops, brushing the clay tiles in warm gold and casting long shadows that stretch like sleepy limbs. The scroll case in your hand hums gently, not urgently, not mysteriously, just familiarly, like a friend clearing their throat to say, "Shall we go then?" Plumcake is, as expected, already waiting. She stands near the gate, antlers backlit by the sun, a small twig of something green dangling from her mouth like she's chewing on a philosophical idea. You raise the scroll case and tap it twice. She flicks an ear and lowers her head. Back to it then. The postmaster waves lazily from a stool by the door, one boot off and soaking in a tub of cold water. "Try not to get turned into poetry this time," he calls out. You raise an eyebrow. "That's oddly specific." He grins. "Just sayin'. The last rider to carry a scroll with a plum blossom seal came back in verse and couldn't stop rhyming for a week." You sincerely hope he's joking. But then again, this is Zhang's Rest. You've ridden through mist that whispered back, and lakes that stared into you. A poetic curse wouldn't even crack your top 10. You mount. Plumcake moves with a quiet ease, hooves tapping lightly on the packed earth road as you leave the village behind. The new scroll rests snug in your satchel, not heavy but undeniably present. The route isn't a ridge climb this time, nor a deep forest threading with old riddles. It's simpler, flatter, a winding path that curves through low valleys filled with rice paddies and dragonflies that hover in slow spirals above the water. You pass a farmer tending to rows of taro, his hat slanted against the light. He nods politely as you go by. His dog blinks at Plumcake, but wisely decides not to engage. The air smells of wet soil and new leaves. It's peaceful. And that, naturally, is what makes you suspicious. No courier trusts a journey that's too easy. There's always a bend in the trail. You reach it just after sunset. A sharp turn by a crooked willow, followed by a sudden stretch of ancient paving stones, the kind too perfect to be recent, too intact to be chance. You slow Plumcake to a walk. The stones are engraved. You lean down as you ride, catching glimpses in your lantern's growing glow. Characters, tiny ones, old, not decorative. Instructions, names, warnings? It's hard to tell. And then you see it. One single stone, cracked down the middle, with an engraving in the exact shape of a plum blossom. You stop. Plumcake snorts, not in alarm, but as if to say, "Ah, here we go." You dismount and walk the remaining stretch, lantern held low. The path narrows again, framed by high reeds and gentle curves in the terrain that feel almost like they're meant to guide your steps. And then, just beyond a pair of leaning stone markers covered in moss, you find it. A house. Small, round, thatched roof. No lanterns, no smoke, just a faint glow from within, like candlelight tucked behind rice paper. You approach slowly. No barking dog, no owl, no "who dares deliver mail at this hour?" Just quiet. You knock. Once. Twice.
and the door opens by itself. Inside, a single room, a table, 2 cups, a kettle steaming quietly over a brazier, and an old man sitting on a cushion facing the doorway like he's been expecting you since before you were born. "Ah," he says, smiling, "right on time." You hesitate. You were expecting a scroll? He gestures to the empty cushion across from him. "No, I was expecting you." Plumcake stays just outside the door, watching, chewing, unimpressed. You sit. The man pours tea, sips, then places a small wooden box between you. You glance at it. Is this the return message? He nods. "But I haven't given you this scroll yet." He smiles wider. Time doesn't always travel in straight lines on these roads. You blink, slowly. This is going to get weird, isn't it? Only if you insist on understanding it. You sip your tea. It's cinnamon, or maybe cassia, or maybe just warm. He sips his. And for a long time, you both sit in silence, like 2 old friends who haven't met yet. Then he leans forward and says, "Take the box to the woman in the cellar. Tell her the ride back feels almost too smooth, like the road is smoothing itself for your hooves, pre-warmed like bath water drawn by a considerate host." Plumcake trots without hesitation, her usual diva pace now replaced by a relaxed, almost philosophical rhythm. You've ridden through mist and ghostly bells, sure, but this is different. The wind is mild, brushing gently past your cheeks with a scent like steamed rice and old books. It's comforting, but not sleepy, like the world is awake with you, not in a rush, but aware. You glance down at the box tucked snugly in your satchel. It's unmarked, just smooth lacquered wood, no seal, no inscription. Yet you swear you feel something waiting inside. Not vibrating or whispering, thank goodness. Just waiting. The old man's words echo in your head. Tell her the jujube fell before the wind. You still don't know what it means. You're not even sure he knew what it meant. But that seems to be the way of this strange courier life. Carry the message, let others do the understanding. The stars overhead are brighter now, pinpricks of silver arranged in constellations you sort of recognize. There's the one that looks like a deer with a hat. Probably not its official name, but you and Plumcake have agreed on it. And there, just cresting the far ridge, is the soft glow of Zhang's Rest. Home. For now. You pass through the outer gate with barely a glance from the sleepy watchman who offers you a boiled egg from his pocket and then immediately forgets he did. You accept it, because that's the kind of day this is. Plumcake heads straight for her favorite patch of moss by the post house. No theatrics, just a long exhale and a satisfied thump as she collapses in her usual spot. You dismount, stretch, and head toward the cellar. The postmaster is dozing again, one sock halfway off. You consider waking him, but decide the mystery of why is this courier carrying a mysterious box and a hard-boiled egg is best left for morning. You slip around the corner, past the jars in the soup ladle shelf, and descend the creaking stairs into the sorting cellar. She's there, still cross-legged, still surrounded by scrolls, still sipping the same cup of tea that somehow has not emptied. She looks up, sees the box, smiles. "Took you long enough," she says. "I didn't know I was going," you reply. "No one ever does." You sit, hand her the box. She opens it without ceremony. Inside, a single folded paper crane. Delicate, pale blue, the wings slightly curled from humidity. She lifts it gently, studies it. "Haven't seen one of these in years." You blink. "That's it?" She nods. "This is the message." "A bird?" "A memory," she corrects. Then, without looking up, she says, "He told you something." You nod. "The jujube fell before the wind." She smiles. Not big, but deep, a memory flickering behind her eyes. "I see," she whispers. And she places the crane on the desk beside a stack of scrolls marked "dormant until moonless."
You watch her work in silence for a few minutes. She unrolls an old scroll, squints at it, frowns, and tosses it into the nest material box. Finally, you say, "So, was this a delivery or a retrieval?" She shrugs. "Yes." "Is that a helpful answer?" "No." You laugh softly, surprised by how tired you feel. She looks at you. "You did well. Most don't make it past the second bell." You shift, remembering the echo of that deep tone through the valley, the feeling of something vast watching from the dark. She adds, "And fewer still come back curious instead of afraid." You think about that. "I'm still afraid," you say. "Good," she replies. "It means you're paying attention." She sets her tea down, finally empty. Then she reaches into the folds of her robe and pulls out a tiny bell. It's tarnished, tied with a ribbon the color of old rose petals. She places it on the floor between you. "For plum cake," she says. You stare at it. "What does it do?" "Depends," she says. "Sometimes it keeps you safe. Sometimes it tells you when to stop. Sometimes it just makes her look important." You pick it up carefully. The bell makes no sound. "Thank you," you say. She nods once, already turning back to the next scroll. You climb the stairs slowly, the bell tucked in your palm like a fragile promise. Outside, Plum Cake lifts her head, sniffs. You tie the bell gently to one of her antlers. She doesn't protest, then lays her head back down. The stars are dimmer now. Dawn approaches again. You lean against the post house door, and somewhere, just outside the reach of history books and properly labeled roads, a scroll waits for its rider.
You dream of courtyards with no doors, of deer that speak in riddles, of scrolls that unfold themselves in moonlight and recite poems you forgot you once knew. When you wake, the postmaster is already halfway through a steamed bun and attempting to write his daily log with his left hand because his right is stuck in a jar of preserved plums. "Morning," he mumbles, as if this qualifies as a reasonable start to the day. You nod, stretch, try not to groan audibly as your spine argues with gravity. Plum Cake is still asleep, her new bell resting quietly against the post beam. The ribbon has shifted slightly, catching a bit of morning sun and casting a soft pink glow on her fur. It doesn't ring, you don't expect it to. You step into the sorting cellar just as the woman is finishing her tea. "No new scrolls today," she says without looking up. "Unless the mice bring one." You raise an eyebrow. "They're excellent couriers," she adds, "until they start eating the paper." You laugh, and she gestures to a cushion beside her. "But there's something you should see." You sit, and she places a scroll in front of you, unsealed, aged, its corners slightly worn, but the ink still crisp. The first word is your name. You blink, look up, she nods. "It's from a station keeper," she explains, "years ago. He wrote it when he knew he wouldn't finish his last ride." You trace the characters. The handwriting is neat, formal, but there's a tremble in the lines, a hesitation that suggests this wasn't meant to be read aloud. "He never delivered it," she says, "but he hoped someone would." You stare at the message, feeling the weight of something you didn't ask for, but suddenly can't imagine not carrying. "You want me to take it?" She smiles gently. "It wants you to take it." That phrasing again, as if the message itself has a say in things. You fold the scroll carefully, tucking it into a new case, one lined with velvet and tied with a black and gold cord. It hums lightly in your hands, not like the scented one, not like the reply scroll. This one feels older, quieter, a memory searching for its missing half. You step outside, where Plum Cake is now upright and nibbling at a potted chili plant someone unwisely left within reach. She turns as you approach, nose twitching. You pat her shoulder and adjust the bell on her antler, still silent. The path this time heads west, not the mountains, not the lake, but a dusty, overlooked trail that winds through old market towns, past shrines that haven't seen incense in years. You ride out under a sky half full of clouds, your lantern unlit for now, the scroll resting against your back like a warm echo. The towns are quiet. A woman sweeping her shop front pauses to stare at you, then returns to her broom without a word. A child runs alongside you for a few steps, then drops back, laughing for no reason at all. You pass an abandoned post station around midday. The shutters hang crooked, the yard overgrown. You dismount and step inside. The air smells of paper and rain. Inside, you find a ledger still resting open on the desk. One entry. Scroll received. Rider departed. No return. You close the book. Step back into the sunlight. Mount again. Plumcake seems to sense the shift. She's quieter too. Focused. By late afternoon, you reach a field of tall grass that hums with wind and insect song. The trail cuts through it like a forgotten footstep, barely visible unless you know where to look. At the center, a tree. Not tall, not wide, but old. Its bark worn smooth in places where hands have touched it, marking time, offering prayers, tying wishes. You stop there, dismount. The scroll in your satchel is warm again. You place it in the crook of the tree, where the bark has folded in on itself like a sleeping palm. You wait. Nothing happens for a long while. Then the wind changes. A breeze circles the clearing. The leaves rustle like whispering voices too tired to argue. You close your eyes, and when you open them again, the scroll is gone. Only a single jujube rests in its place. You pick it up, turn. Plumcake is already walking back toward the path. No need to ask where next. The road always knows. You follow. You and Plumcake ride without urgency. The sky fades from its bright afternoon gold into that soft, silvery haze that settles in just before dusk. It's the hour when time forgets itself, when shopkeepers light lamps they don't yet need, and sparrows sing for no one in particular. You pass through a field of crooked rice terraces, their edges crumbling, half forgotten by both farmers and mapmakers. A scarecrow nods politely as you go by, though it may have just been the wind. Plumcake seems relaxed again. Her hooves tap a steady beat, not rushing, not lagging. She moves like someone who knows there's soup waiting at the end of this path, and maybe a clean trough to splash her face in. You feel the same. The juju from the tree rests in your pocket. It's small, firm, slightly tacky. You don't know why you kept it, except that it felt right. You haven't unwrapped it. You don't intend to. The trail winds low now, tracing the edges of a dry riverbed, and you see a small post sign carved from stone. Barely readable, but just enough to make out a name. Songlint Waypoint. It hasn't been used in decades, but the paint is still faintly visible beneath the moss, and the door to the post hut, slightly ajar. You dismount, push it open. The hinges groan like they're surprised to be asked. Inside is dust, shadows, and a table with 4 legs, 3 of which are confident. A small clay stove in the corner still holds old ash. Next to it, a bundle of firewood someone tied with ribbon, red and gold, the kind used in festivals. There's no one here, but someone expected you. You light the stove, more for the ritual than the warmth. It accepts the flame easily. Plumcake nudges her way in through the doorway, barely. She settles near the wall, eyeing the ribbon-wrapped firewood as if wondering if it's edible. You offer her the other half of your rice cake. She eats it without making eye contact. You sit, exhale. Let your spine unspool slightly. And that's when you notice the envelope. Resting on the table, not hidden, not dusty, just waiting. It's addressed to the one who came after. You glance at Plumcake. She blinks slowly, supportive but not invested. You open the envelope. Inside is a single page, handwritten. You are not the first to walk this road. Some messages are passed with intention, others with hope. But this one was carried forward by a rider who never made it home. You are finishing what they started. Thank you. No name, but beneath the message, pressed into the bottom corner, is a fingerprint. Faint, smudged, but still there. You stare at it longer than you need to, then fold the letter carefully and slide it into your satchel beside the juju. You sit with the fire until the sun is gone, until the lamp outside the hut begins to glow faintly of its own accord, as if the air around this place still remembers the rhythm of riders, the gentle clink of antler bells, the creak of scroll cases shifting beneath traveling coats. Finally, you rise. Plumcake gets up, stretches dramatically, and gives you a look that clearly says, if you're going to keep delivering ghost mail, I expect snacks. You nod. Fair. The night trail opens ahead, wide and soft, moonlight tracing the dust in silver. The world feels both vast and wrapped close around you. And somewhere out there, beyond the rice fields and overgrown shrines, a village waits that no one has visited in years. But they'll know you're coming. They always do.
The night air hums with the easy rhythm of a world that has decided not to rush you. Crickets chirp softly. Leaves rustle just enough to keep the silence company. Even your lantern seems to flicker more slowly, casting a golden halo that pulses in time with your breath. Plumcake moves like a dream you almost forgot, light on her hooves, tail swinging lazily, the bell on her antler still silent but somehow expressive. She doesn't look tired, she looks content, and that unnerves you more than it should. The scroll case on your back rests against your shoulder like a sleeping bird. No vibration, no glow, no unexpected warmth. But every now and then you imagine its size. You pass through a grove of old apricot trees. Their blossoms have long since fallen, but the sweet, sour smell still lingers on the wind. One tree leans a little farther into the path than the others. You reach out, touch the bark. It's warm. The trail begins to rise again, not steep, just enough to remind your legs they're attached to you. And then, just past a crumbling milestone etched with a spiral, you see it, a faint flicker of movement ahead. Not human, not animal. A banner. Tied to a bamboo pole that someone's wedged between two stones, swaying in the breeze like it's trying to wave you in. You squint. There's a character stitched on the fabric in careful thread. One word. Still. You and Plumcake both stop. She stares at the banner. You stare at her. You want to turn around, you ask? She doesn't move. You adjust your grip on the reins, ceremonial, not practical, and nudge her forward. She obeys. As you pass beneath the banner, the wind shifts. You smell ink. Fresh. The trail dips suddenly and leads you down into a small valley ringed with trees that lean in just a little too much, like they're eavesdropping. And there, in the center, is a village. At least it used to be. What remains are the bones of buildings, walls half standing, windows empty, roofs collapsed like sleeping beasts. But here and there, traces of life flicker. A paper lantern, unlit, still hanging from a crooked eave. A broom propped beside a door, its bristles worn to nothing. And in the middle of the square, a well. Beside the well, a chair. And in the chair, a woman. Old? Maybe. Her posture is straight, her robes unwrinkled. Her hair is long and black and pinned up with a jade comb. She watches you approach with no surprise, as if she's watched many before you,
as if she's the only one left to watch. You stop a few paces away, dismount. The scroll feels heavy now, but not in your hand, in your chest. She gestures to the well. Tie the deer there. Let her drink. It's good water. Clean. You do as you're told. Plumcake sniffs once, then dips her head to drink. You approach the woman slowly, scroll in hand. You know what this is, you say, though it feels absurd. She nods. I do, though I don't know which version it is. You blink. There's more than one? Her lips curve into a smile, not kind, but not unkind either. There always is. Every message rewrites itself slightly for the one who carries it. You offer her the scroll. She doesn't take it. Place it on the chair beside me, she says. I'll read it when you're gone. You hesitate, then obey. She watches you for a moment longer, then asks, Did the jujube fall before the wind? You freeze. Yes, you whisper, it did. She nods, satisfied. Then you're the right one. You don't know what to say. She does. You may leave now, but the trail will be different. You look around. How? It will remember you, she says. It always does. You bow, not because you understand, but because she deserves it. You walk back to Plumcake, who finishes drinking and snorts like about time. You mount, turn back toward the trail, and pause. The village behind you looks newer, walls less crumbled, lanterns freshly hung. Somewhere a wind chime stirs. You ride on. At the edge of the valley, a small stone marks the path. Someone has carved a deer into its surface. The antlers form a spiral. The road ahead is quiet but alive. It curves into the hills with the confidence of something that knows exactly where it's going. And you follow. Because you always do. Because
The path narrows as the moon rises higher. No longer a soft silver blush, but a polished coin in the sky, cool and clear. Your lantern is unlit now. There's no need. The road glows faintly in the moonlight, as if the dust itself has memory. Plumcake moves slowly, reverently. Her ears twitch, catching distant sounds. An owl's cough, the whisper of a reed brushing another. Even her breath feels quieter than usual, like she's trying not to wake the road beneath her. You're back in the hills now, though they feel different. Less steep, more worn. Trails braided by centuries of feet and hooves and decisions made with a coin toss. There are no markers here, no banners, no stone guides. Only that feeling, just behind your ribs, that you're not lost. Not exactly. It's not direction that guides you. It's belonging. You round a bend, and there it is, a bridge. Not like the one before with ropes and bamboo slats, but a single slab of stone, arched gently over a dry stream bed. On the far side, a figure. They're seated cross-legged at the edge of the bridge, chewing something thoughtfully. You pause at the base of the arch. Plumcake, without instruction, stops. The figure looks up. You recognize the rider immediately. Same crisp robes, same deer with the deep blue harness, and yes, still circling the same bamboo grove, metaphorically speaking. I knew you'd come this way, he says around a bite of dried persimmon. You're not lost anymore, you ask, surprised. He shrugs. Still a little, but I've started enjoying it. You glance around. This route's not marked. He nods. They rarely are, not the good ones. His deer snorts softly and begins grooming one of its own legs with exaggerated elegance. Plumcake responds with a sniff and a low ch that is unmistakably judgy. The rider finishes his snack and stands, brushing off his knees. You're headed back? You nod. Sort of. I think the road just loops when it's ready. Doesn't everything? You want to argue. Instead, you smile. What's waiting up ahead? He pauses, thoughtful. A guest house if you're lucky, a test if you're not, or a mirror. You raise an eyebrow. A mirror? He grins. You'll see. He mounts his deer in a single graceful motion. See you around, courier. And just like last time, he disappears. This time uphill, along a path that didn't exist until he stepped onto it. Then it closes behind him like water. You cross the bridge. The scroll you delivered earlier, the one to the woman at the well, left you feeling emptied, like a breath exhaled fully for the first time. This one you carry now doesn't feel like that. It's quieter, heavier, less a message than a memory. You wonder what it is you've agreed to hold. The trail ahead winds through tall grass and begins to rise again. The hills here are gentle but wide, as if the landscape is exhaling too. As you crest the slope, you see it, a house, or perhaps a hall. At first it looks like a ruin, but as you approach, details sharpen. Tiles shimmer with moonlight. The courtyard is swept clean. A tea tray sits waiting, cups already set. Plum Cake stops at the edge of the stone steps. You dismount. Tie her to a post made from twisted laurel wood. She rests her chin on the knot and watches you with the faint suspicion of someone who knows they're not invited. You enter. Inside, silence. No one, yet the hearth is warm. A kettle murmurs softly on a brazier. Candles flicker in glass bowls. And against the far wall, a mirror. Not large, not ornate, just a sheet of polished bronze, hung slightly crooked. You approach it. Your reflection stares back. Not distorted, not aged, but weighted. You look like someone who knows something now, something not quite nameable. And then your reflection does something your body does not. It lifts a scroll, slowly, respectfully, and it places it down. On your side of the mirror, nothing moves. Your hands remain empty. But when you glance at the low table beside you, the scroll case you were carrying is gone, and in its place, a folded piece of paper. You pick it up. It reads, "Well done." The road home feels like a lullaby you've heard before, but only now begin to hum along with. Each bend is familiar in the way dreams are familiar, twisted, softened, slightly worn at the edges by memory. Plum Cake walks without prompting. She doesn't even flick her ears at the occasional night beetle or low branch. She knows where you're going. You don't ask how. You're not even sure what you'll do when you get back to Zhang's Rest. Sleep, probably. Maybe tea. Maybe stare at the wall until someone hands you another scroll and says, "This one goes to the ghost who writes backwards." But for now, it's enough to just ride. The trail evens out into a flat stretch of packed dirt flanked by silent trees. You see a fire up ahead, small, clean, someone's camp. A familiar silhouette hunches beside it, fiddling with a pot suspended above the flames. As you approach, the figure stands, turns. It's the barefoot station keeper from Lantern Hollow, sleeves rolled, a stick of cinnamon tucked behind one ear. "Was wondering when you'd wander back through," he says. You dismount. Plum Cake goes straight for the leftover rice balls cooling on a flat stone. He doesn't stop her. He gestures to a place beside the fire. "Sit." You're twitching like someone who's seen a second version of themselves. You sit. It was a mirror. He nods. "That's worse." You watch the fire crackle. It smells faintly of cloves. You feel like asking something profound, but all that comes out is, "Do you think the trail ever ends?" He stirs the pot thoughtfully. "Not really. Sometimes it folds, sometimes it forgets itself. But ends?" He shrugs. "Nah, it waits, it reshapes, but it doesn't stop." You warm your hands on the kettle's side. "What about the messages? Do they ever finish?" He chuckles. Some do, but not the important ones. Those get rewritten, passed on, hidden inside others. They echo. You remember the scroll that vanished in the mirror, the folded paper it left behind. Return when you forget why you started, you murmur. He glances at you. You remembered it, though. You nod. Then you're not done. Plumcake lies down by the fire, belly warm, eyelids heavy. Her bell doesn't ring, but you feel it might if someone asked the right question at the wrong time. The station keeper ladles tea into 2 mismatched cups and hands you one. This one's got ginger and some kind of leaf I don't remember the name of, he says. Might be poisonous, but only to liars. You sip. It's earthy and sharp, and probably completely safe. Probably. You watch the fire together, saying nothing for a while. The stars wheel overhead, the coals sink lower. Then he says, "You'll ride again. When the trail wants you, not before." You believe him. Somewhere behind you, the trail has already curled back in on itself. Somewhere ahead, it's coiling, waiting to open again. But not tonight. Tonight, the road is a blanket, and the sky is a roof, and the messages, whatever they are, can wait. You lie down with your cloak drawn up, Plumcake snoring faintly beside you. And as you drift, you dream of scrolls that bloom like flowers, of roads that laugh when you fall, of deer that leap between worlds. And you rest. Because rest, too, is part of the message.
The fire has dwindled to a whisper by the time you stir. Morning hasn't fully arrived, just the pale gray hint of it at the edge of the sky, like a lantern behind rice paper. You stretch slowly, careful not to wake Plumcake, who's snoring lightly with one leg twitching in some kind of heroic dream, possibly food-related. The station keeper is gone. No footprints, no discarded teacups. Just a small scroll case sitting where he had been. Of course. You sit up, rubbing your eyes, and pick it up. It's light, no seal, just a strip of fabric tied around it, dark blue, worn soft with age. You untie it and unroll the parchment inside. No message, no ink, just one line pressed into the paper itself, like a watermark that only shows when the light hits just right. This is the route that remembers. You stare at it a while, unsure if it's a reminder, a warning, or a welcome. Possibly all three. Plumcake rises, yawns dramatically, then walks over and bumps your shoulder with her forehead in a clear, let's get moving gesture. You mount. The saddleless routine is now second nature. Your knees tuck just right, the path opens ahead. This time there's no specific destination, no urgent letter, no waiting monk or mirror or ghost woman by a well. This time you're riding because the trail asked you to. And maybe that's enough. The landscape rolls past in quiet gradients of color. First silver dawn, then gold, then soft earth tones that blur the edge of memory. You pass through groves of persimmon trees where birds sing as though nothing unusual has ever happened. A creek murmurs alongside you for a while, then takes a sharp turn west like it's late for an appointment. Eventually, you reach a crossroad marked by a crooked signpost with no words. Just symbols, a plum blossom, a deer, a spiral. You recognize them. You've lived them. There's a bench beside the sign. You dismount and sit, letting the quiet stretch around you like a blanket. Plumcake finds a patch of thistle she doesn't hate and settles beside you. You watch the sky for a while. A few clouds drift by in shapes that almost mean something. After some time, a rider appears in the distance. You know before they're close that it's not someone you've met before. Their deer is pale, almost silver. Their satchel carries scrolls wrapped in green cloth, and they sit a little too straight, like someone fresh from training who hasn't yet learned the trail always wins. As they near, they hesitate. Eye your presence, look at Plumcake, look at you. Then, "Courier?" You nod. They pull up alongside the bench.
I was told I might see someone here, they say. Didn't say who, just someone. You smile. Sometimes that's all the trail gives you. They dismount, a little stiffly, stretch, then offer a scroll. No name, they add, but it smells like dried mango and cinnamon. You accept it without question. Open it. One sentence inside. When you find someone who knows where not to go, follow them anyway. You fold the scroll. Look at the new rider. Come on, you say. Let's ride a while. They blink. Where to? You shrug. We'll know when we get there. Plumcake rises with an exaggerated sigh. The new deer looks bewildered but intrigued. The trail stretches ahead. Nothing unusual at first, just a bend. Then a stone you swear wasn't there before. Then a tree whose bark forms the shape of a character you can't quite read. The trail always changes, but it never forgets. You ride on, because you are part of it now, and it is part of you.
You ride side by side with the new courier for some time, neither of you in a hurry. The road winds gently, like it's stretching after a long nap, weaving through dry brush and low, singing grasses. There's no real destination, and that's beginning to feel more like a feature than a flaw. Your companion doesn't talk much. They're still wrapped in the quiet anxiety of someone who hasn't yet learned the road listens. You remember that feeling, the itch between the shoulders, the sense that every tree is watching, every hill waiting for a test you haven't studied for. Eventually they ask, "How long have you been riding?" You think about it, try to pin a number to the trail, fail. Long enough that I stopped needing to ask where it ends. They nod. You don't know if they understand yet, but they will. You crest a ridge just before midday, the sun angling behind you like it's herding you forward. Below, a scattering of rooftops, some collapsed, some leaning. One, shockingly, smoking gently from a chimney. Plumcake picks up her pace. As you descend into the hollow, the air shifts. Warmth, smoke, and the faint smell of something savory. Onions, maybe, garlic, possibly mushrooms. Your stomach remembers it hasn't been fed since yesterday's philosophical rice cake. At the base of the hill is a low house with faded red doors. A sign hanging from a bent hook reads, "Post House 9 3/4, meals and maps, mostly accurate." You dismount. Plumcake immediately heads for the water trough and submerges her entire nose like she's communing with the spirit of hydration itself. A woman steps out from behind the house. Her apron is stained, her sleeves rolled. She has one eyebrow raised and a wooden spoon in her hand like it's both a utensil and a threat. "You two look like you've been riding with secrets," she says. "I don't serve secrets. I serve stew. Sit." You sit. She ladles food into mismatched bowls and slides them across the table with the precision of a general and the attitude of a potter who's sick of making vases for royalty. As you eat, your companion glances around. Is this an official post house? You answer before the cook can. It used to be, then it chose not to be. She grins. Exactly. Too many rules, not enough rice. You finish the stew. It's oddly good, possibly magical, possibly just made with more mushrooms than anyone admits to. The woman clears the bowls and sets down a teapot without asking. "Message came through yesterday," she says, "for the one with the plum bell." You blink, reach up, touch the silent bell tied to Plumcake's antler. "Didn't think it meant me," you say. She shrugs. "Trail says what it says." She hands you a folded note. Not a scroll this time, just a piece of parchment tied with thread. No seal, just 3 words written in the same ink as the banner you passed days ago. Still in motion. You open it. Inside is a list, not of names, not of places, but of moments. A deer that refused to move. A lake that knew your face. A scroll that mirrored you. A bell that hasn't rung yet. A message still unfolding. You stare at it. The cook sees your expression.
Nods. Trail's been watching you. Your companion leans over. What does it mean? You exhale. It means we're not done. They nod slowly, tracing one finger along the table's grain. Do you ever want to be done? You look at the road, at the satchel slung over your shoulder, at Plumcake, who is now snoring beneath a lantern. No, you say honestly, I just want to keep being the one it chooses. The cook smirks. Well, finish your tea. Next part's dusty. You drink. The tea is bitter, grounding, like it was brewed with mountain bark and just a pinch of warning. Outside, the wind picks up. The cook hands you 2 scrolls wrapped in plain cloth. One for the next person, one for the road itself. Don't mix them up. You mount. Adjust your pack. Your companion does the same, eyes narrowed, posture more settled now. You both ride out, back onto the open trail. The path ahead is forked again. Of course it is. But this time, you don't wait for a sign. You turn left, the one that feels like it's been waiting. And the road leans forward, eager.
The fork you chose leads into a stretch of road so quiet it seems to muffle even your thoughts. The trees are tall and straight here, cypresses maybe, standing so close together their branches form a green canopy that filters the daylight into soft, shifting patterns. Plumcake's hooves fall almost silently on the pine needle floor. Behind you, your companion's deer follows with an obedient hush. No conversation now, just breathing, just rhythm. You glance over your shoulder once. Your companion raises an eyebrow, as if to ask, "Are you sure this way?" You nod. You don't explain that the road beneath you feels warmer here. That every time your hand brushes your satchel, the scroll intended for the road itself seems to tug slightly, like a sleeve being pulled by a child who wants to whisper a secret. Eventually, the trees open. Not into a clearing, not into a village, but into a long, narrow bridge, stone and wood fused together in a way you've never seen before. It stretches across a dry ravine that feels deeper than it looks. The wind swirls down there, restless and cool, tugging at your sleeves. You stop at the edge. In the center of the bridge stands a small post. Nailed to it, a wooden sign. Carved into it are 5 words. Place it here. Walk on. Your companion dismounts beside you. Is that the scroll? You nod, unbuckling the case that vibrates gently every time the trail bends. It's the one the cook gave you and warned not to mix up. You untie the twine, open the flap, and remove the scroll. It's plain, untitled. But when you hold it over the post, something happens. The wind stops. Utter stillness. Even Plumcake, who has previously ignored spiritual events in favor of snacks, lifts her head sharply and stares forward. You place the scroll on the post. It doesn't fall, it doesn't blow away. It just settles, as though this has been its home all along. You and your companion cross the bridge on foot, leading your deer. No words are exchanged. There's nothing to say. Halfway across, you feel it. A shimmer, like heat rising from a flat stone, but colder. You glance down and see, not your reflection, but a version of yourself, older, sitting on a bench, holding a scroll you don't recognize. They look up at you, wink, then vanish. Your companion gasps softly. Did you? You nod. It's just the trail playing games. They blink. What kind of games? The ones that leave you better than they found you, you say. You reach the far end of the bridge and remount. Plumcake is calm again, her hooves steady. Beyond the bridge, the road splits again, but this time not into 2, into 4. Your companion tugs gently on their reins. This seems excessive. You don't respond immediately. The scroll marked for the next person is in your pack. You take it out. The fabric wrapping falls away. A message appears, scrawled not in ink, but burned into the parchment in fine, curling lines. This scroll finds who it needs. You hand it to your companion. They blink. Me? You nod. It's not mine. They study it, then carefully tuck it into their own satchel. When they look up again, their expression has changed. They're no longer following. They've become something else. A carrier, a chosen, a chapter. You know which path is yours, they ask. You do. You don't know why, but you do. Yours is the third road, narrow, uphill, edged with stones that seem to hum if you ride too fast. You point to the second road. That one's yours. They nod. How do you know? Because it's the one that doesn't want you yet. They smile at that. Guess I'll change its mind. You each ride toward your separate paths. But before the trail carries you too far apart, you call out. If you ever reach the place with no sky, don't stop. Keep riding. It's not the end. They raise a hand in acknowledgement. Then they vanish into the fold of the hills. You press your knees gently into Plumcake's sides. She moves forward, hooves crunching lightly over gravel and fern. The third path feels old, older than any you've ridden before, but it feels ready. And behind you, somewhere back near the bridge, the scroll still sits quietly on the post, waiting, perhaps, to speak to the road itself, or to no one, or to the next rider who dares to read what isn't written.
The third path winds upward through thinning trees, the kind that no longer try to impress with height or grandeur. They're practical trees, low, gnarled, bark like aged hands. You duck once or twice beneath stubborn branches that refuse to yield, even for a courier. Plumcake pushes forward without complaint, though she gives one such branch a grumpy side-eye that suggests a personal grudge. The air grows thinner, crisper, higher. You begin to feel it in your chest. Not breathlessness exactly, but that peculiar lightness that only comes from altitude and anticipation. The trail isn't steep, but every curve demands your attention. And something about the silence here, it presses gently on your ears, like cotton tucked inside your thoughts. Then, just as the path starts to level, you see it. Not a village, not a ruin, but a wall. Stone, perfectly flat, carved into the mountainside itself. No windows, no door. At first it seems a dead end, but as you draw closer, something changes. You notice a shimmer in the air just above the surface, like heat or memory. The closer you get, the more it pulses gently, as though breathing. You dismount. Plumcake watches from a few paces back, clearly uninterested in whatever magical nonsense this is. She begins licking dew from a nearby rock. You let her be. You let her be. You approach the wall and press your hand to it. Warm. Faint vibrations move beneath your palm. And then a voice, not spoken aloud, but not imagined either. It moves along your skin like music hummed from the inside. Do you know what you're carrying? You take the scroll from your pack, the one you thought was empty, the one you received with no message inside, just that silent thread of implication. You hold it in front of you. The wall shifts. A crack appears down the center. Slowly, silently, it parts, revealing a chamber beyond, glowing faintly with blue light. Inside, shelves. Endless shelves. Scrolls upon scrolls, wrapped and stacked, each with a tiny ribbon tied in a different color. Some are sealed with wax, others are open, as if still being written. A library, but not for reading. A library for resting. You step in. The air smells like cedar wood and memory. There's a stone pedestal in the center of the room. On it, a small bowl filled with silver sand. You walk to it and lay your scroll atop the grains. The moment it touches the sand, the parchment begins to dissolve.
Not burn, not vanish, but soften into the air, like a breath released after a long-held pause. You don't feel sad. You feel relieved. The wall behind you closes. No panic, just silence. You look around the chamber. There's no exit now, just the scrolls and you, and a single bench carved from smooth blackwood. You sit. For a long time, nothing happens. Then, from the corner of the room, a voice. Old, but not tired. Amused. You delivered it? You turn. A man is sitting on a ladder that wasn't there a moment ago, legs dangling over the edge like a child at a pond. He has ink stains on his fingers and an earring shaped like a compass rose. I did, you say. He nods. Didn't think you'd make it. You shrug. I didn't either. He hops down. Well, now that you're here, you have a choice. You wait. He gestures to the scroll shelves. You can rest. You've earned it. Or, you raise an eyebrow. He smiles. Or I can show you the scrolls still waiting for their couriers. You look at the wall. It hasn't reopened. You glance at your pack. It's empty. You meet his eyes. Show me. He grins, delighted. Plumcake snorts just outside the chamber, as if to say, "Of course you did." The man walks toward a small spiral staircase you hadn't noticed before. You're not the first to ask, he calls over his shoulder, but you might be the first who didn't need to. You follow. Because the trail doesn't end. It just offers you more. And sometimes you say yes.
The spiral staircase is impossibly long and impossibly quiet. Your boots make no sound on the smooth stone steps, and your guide, this amused, ink-stained librarian of scrolls, walks ahead without glancing back. He doesn't need to. The trail already knows you're following. Down you go. Down past walls etched with curling script you can't read but feel. Down past dim alcoves where candles burn without smoke. Down past a shallow niche where a single deer skull rests on velvet, a bell tied loosely around one antler. When you finally reach the bottom, it isn't dark, it's glowing. You step into a chamber shaped like a spiral shell. The walls curve endlessly inward, lined from floor to ceiling with cubbies. Each cubby holds a scroll. Thousands of them. No dust, no cobwebs, no sense of abandonment. Every scroll hums softly, like it's thinking in its sleep. Your guide gestures broadly. This is where they wait. You approach the nearest scroll. Its ribbon is golden yellow, the kind that reminds you of chrysanthemums and the outer rind of preserved lemon. A small tag dangles from it, etched with 2 characters. We zo. Unwalked. You glance at your guide. They're undelivered? He shrugs. Not yet claimed, not by the right feet. You trace your finger lightly over the scroll's edge. It's warm. It smells faintly of rosemary and ink. Then you notice a peculiar cubby, empty. No scroll. Just a folded strip of cloth tied into a loose knot. You reach for it. Your guide stiffens. Not warning exactly, more like surprise. When you unfold it, you find a message embroidered in a single thread. Some messages don't want to be carried, only known. You look back at him. He smiles. You find that one, and the trail really trusts you. You're about to ask more when a sound cuts through the silence. A distant bell, soft but unmistakable. You both freeze. He frowns. That's not one of ours. Another ring, this one closer. Plum cake. You turn toward the staircase, but there's no door now, no path. Your guide tilts his head. Looks like you've been called. You exhale. Already? He laughs. No such thing as already on the trail. Just when. You glance once more around the chamber. One scroll flutters slightly in its cubby without wind. Another changes color at the edge of your vision.
You want to stay, to explore, to learn. But Plumcake's bell rings again, not urgent, but patient, expectant. You turn to your guide. Will I come back here? He nods. If the message brings you. You smile. Step backward. The room begins to fold. Not blur, not vanish, fold. Like paper in careful hands. The walls curl, the shelves dissolve into lines, and the light contracts into a single spiral of gold before vanishing with a soft shh. You're standing in the middle of a stone road again. The wind is moving gently. The sky above is deep blue with a promise of stars. Plumcake stands nearby, reins looped around a crooked marker stone, looking vaguely annoyed that you made her wait. You approach, rest your hand on her shoulder. She leans into it slightly. Then, behind you, the sound of footsteps. Not hurried, not hesitant, just ready. You turn. Another rider, not one you know, but familiar in the way reflections are familiar, just slightly distorted. They hold a scroll wrapped in deep violet cloth. You both regard each other for a moment. Then they nod, say nothing, and keep walking. Plumcake watches them go. Then she turns, lowering her head as if to say, "Where next?" You mount. Not because you know, but the trail has never once led you somewhere by accident. And tonight, the road smells like something new. Lavender, maybe, with a touch of unfinished sentences.
The road ahead is unlike the ones before. It's smoother, first of all, paved with flat stones that show almost no wear, no dust, no moss, as if it has only just been built, just for you. Or maybe it's ancient, so old the trail has memorized it down to the smallest grain. Plumcake's steps echo slightly, and her bell remains still, but not silent. It hums, a low, steady vibration like anticipation held in the chest. The air grows warm as you ride, though no sun burns overhead. There's a strange light, not golden, not blue, just present, soft, like the air itself has learned how to glow. Then, far ahead, a door, standing in the middle of the road, not attached to anything, not part of a building, just a freestanding doorframe made of stone, wrapped in ivy that shouldn't survive in this altitude. You dismount. Plumcake doesn't even blink. She's seen weirder. You approach the door. There's a knob made of polished bone. No sign, no instruction. Just the faint whisper of wind curling through the frame like someone exhaling on the other side. You place your hand on the knob and pause, because behind you, very far behind, you hear footsteps. You turn. No one. But the trail itself shifts slightly, like it's bracing for something. You open the door. Inside, another version of the trail, but upside down. You blank. The trees grow down from the sky. Stones float above the path. A deer, clearly annoyed, walks past you on the ceiling, its hooves tapping the air like it's glass. You step through. Your feet stay on the ground, even though the ground is no longer where it used to be. Plumcake follows you in. Her body blurs at the edges, but she seems unconcerned. In this space, form is more polite suggestion than rule. Ahead, a table, small, round, with a cup of tea already steaming on it. There's a note folded beside the cup. You pick it up. Written in precise, looping brush strokes. This is not the end of your message, just a punctuation mark. You sit. Sip the tea. It tastes like nothing, but it feels like honey, warm, anchoring. As you drink, you realize the scrolls you've carried, the roads you've ridden, the people you've met, the lost rider, the mirror, the cook with her unpoisoned stew. They weren't tests. They were verses. You are the courier of a poem being written by a road with no mouth. You finish the tea. Stand. The door behind you has vanished. But ahead, another path. This one woven from threads of silk and ash. It leads toward a horizon that curves impossibly upward. Plumcake snorts, as if to say, "We'll need snacks." You smile. Mount. And as you ride forward into the folding sky, the trail hums beneath you. Not a song, not a whisper, just one word repeated over and over again by the rhythm of hoofbeats and heartbeats and quiet breaths.
And now the trail grows quiet. Plumcake walks slower. The trees thin once more, and that strange glowing horizon begins to fade into a softer, darker blue. You feel it in your shoulders, the weight slipping off. Not entirely, no, but just enough to breathe easier, just enough to rest. There's no final gate, no grand moment, only a bench by the side of the road. You dismount, stretch, and sit. The seat is worn in the middle, curved to the shape of someone who waited here a long time ago. You imagine they were thinking the same thing you are now, that every message, even unfinished ones, deserve to rest for a while. The stars blink overhead. First a few, then dozens, then hundreds, layered in the sky like dust on velvet. You pull your cloak tighter, not for cold, but for comfort. Plumcake lies beside you, her breathing slow, her antler bell finally quiet. A breeze moves across the grass. Somewhere nearby, a tiny chime rings softly. Not a call, not a warning, just acknowledgement. And you close your eyes. Not because the journey's over, but because it's simply time to pause, to listen, to sleep. And in the hush of that last breath before sleep takes you, the trail leans in, just close enough for a whisper. Well done, courier. We'll ride again soon.